Welcome, neighbor. Will you take a walk with me? During our time together, my prayer is that we are able to step out of our shoes and make an exchange, where I walk inside of your shoes and you walk inside of mine. If you don't have any shoes, that is cool too. I still want to walk along with you. There is countless dimensions at play when we find time to reflect on the mysteries of life. Individuals are never alone in their quest to make sense of the world or interpret their experiences. They emerge from shared communities. Our beliefs are rooted in personal encounter with mystery as a personal offer or to a deeper relationship.
I remember you asking a really profound, simple in the sense that it was concise. It wasn't a simple concept, but it was simple in the sense that it was so foundational, such a basic question that we so rarely take the time to step back and ask. And I can't really totally remember what it was, but I remember thinking, you know, here is someone who is taking seriously what it is that Jesus Christ is calling us to in a life of faith. And someone who takes really seriously the struggle and yet not struggle, if we can connect ourselves to God, of what it means to love God and love our neighbor. You know, and that I just remember being very struck by that with you.
Well, thank you. I'm one of those people who do not shy away from questions because I'm always trying to learn. And when I do try to learn, I still want to continue to ask that same question and again, just to continue to have a different perspective. Today we have Allisson. She's a powerful woman of God, and right now she is serving 2 churches. She is here to join me as we reflect on race and cosmos. And I think this is also a topic that might and will or could be beneficial for the Mississippi neighborhood. I hope and pray that anyone here that is listening, this discourse that we reflect on will become fruitful in the ways in which we find ourselves to navigate through these uncertainties that we are all in. And most importantly, through the journey of reflection on why things are so uncertain, we might be able to find some sense of hope and courage to continue to push forward. Allisson, thank you very much for joining me today. My first question for you is, what exactly is race and what exactly is cosmos? And why is this topic so important for you today?
Oh boy, those are golden questions, Sam. I want to first give a caveat that this is my best understanding today. That doesn't mean that this will be my understanding tomorrow or a week from now, a month from now, or years from now. But as best as I understand race is a construct that was created as a barrier that turned into classism, educationalism, ableism. It intersects across all kinds of boundaries, but it was not a concept that was necessarily operated out of forever historically. my understanding is that in terms of the history of humanity, that this is a fairly recent construct, but it is a powerful one because it has created such boundaries between people, walls between people, and has become something that, rather than stepping into the celebration of diversity, has been used to become oppressive for various people. So that's my understanding of race. That especially as race is lived out here in my country of origin, the United States, it has become a way of disempowering people, negatively impacting people's freedoms, negatively impacting people's abilities to make a living, as well as make a life, and created a system that purposefully creates those boundaries, and has for over 400 years. In terms of the cosmos, so there may be greater ways to flesh out what the concept of race is. It's a concept that I think we have to acknowledge because of the way it has impacted people's lives. I would say it's a concept that needs to be challenged as to its validity. I grew up in a milieu where the messages that I received were that you could categorize people's behaviors according to their race. That is patently false. It is something that is used to profile people, something that is used to keep people from moving into or stepping into what I would say is the fullness of their created diversity, and celebrating that. There's so much there, Sam, that we could unpack. We could spend the whole time just talking about that particular subject,
sure.
I think. And then when we talk about cosmos, that to me represents in so many ways a huge unknown. An unknown, though, that is becoming more and more part of the known. It in some ways represents for me, when we talk about God as being creator of all that is seen and unseen, there is an understanding in my head when I say that there is so much more out there than I can even conceive of. There it is boundless, and it stretches me to consider the cosmos. That this thing called dark and light that we hear as refrains in scripture over and over again takes on a deeper meaning, because there is so much in the cosmos that is beautiful and dark, that needs to be incorporated in our understanding, that light and darkness hold the holy in in a way that historically maybe we haven't allowed to become the fullness of our understanding of God. And I think that's powerful, and I think it holds something powerful for how we then turn around and maybe even take a look at race, because the term dark for too long has been talked about something that has to be overcome by light. And there's something helpful and powerful to that metaphor.
For sure. Yeah.
But that language has a shadow side to it. And the shadow side to that language is the implicit assumption that everything that's dark is not good. And I think words are powerful. And that can implicate how we think about what is holy and what isn't holy. And when we consider the cosmos and just take a look at how much of what we see when we see the universe, which is beautiful, is actually dark. There's just these little pinpoints of light here and there, but there is a beautiful darkness that's there. I think that's a powerful image for us, and an image that can speak to us in terms, theologically, in terms of how we start then understanding what it is that the work of God is about, and who it is that Christ is, and Christ being at work in us and in the world. Because dark is beautiful.
Yeah. It's very rare that a lot of us really truly take the time to reflect on how the cosmos can help us to not like fully grasp like what is going on, because our minds, if we can be honest, is very limited. And I think like
mine certainly is.
Yeah, right. And so I think like for us to create room for a cosmos or the incarnation, the unknown becoming known, I think that will definitely help us to really be cautious and with the words that we use, the way that we have categorized people, and the way that we continue to categorize people, and the way that we fail to really see the agape love in the midst of humanity and nature. Is that kind of like what I'm hearing?
Yeah. I think that there is so much to that. And again, then if the universe is continually expanding,
right, then
my understanding is God as creator has this expansive quality, God, that and how do I incorporate that into my understanding of God? Because to make God graspable, there's a certain static quality that comes across in the way we talk about God. And yet, if God is a creator of an expanding universe, somehow that it says to me that that's somehow reflective of God, but I don't know that I can even articulate it all that well, because it's a radical concept from what I have understood as the omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't mean that God can't expand, but in my mind, it kind of made God a little more fixed.
Yeah.
That God was immutable, and so I'm wrestling with that. What does that mean? How does an expanding universe, or a universe where energy is such a significant part of how the universe operates, how we're beginning to understand the human system operates. There again, that's the expansion of the understanding of God, in the same way that I would say, when we take a look at all human beings who bear the thumbprint of God, who are the imago Dei, the image of God, that means if I have the opportunity to get to know you a little bit and who you are, that means that I get to know a little bit more something of God. And that is true of every single person, that somehow my interaction with them allows me to have a little bit more of an expansive idea of who God is.
For sure.
And that expanding universe kind of idea. So, this is, none of these are super well thought out ideas. They're just the machinations of my mind.
It is an order that is meaningful for sure, because a lot of time, like, if I might be onto something here, when we think about the mystery or the cosmos, we fail to like create space, kind of like what I touched on before just recently. Like, we fail to create space where it can be allowed to help us overcome racism, sexism, and all of these negative things that we find ourselves to detach our temple from. Based on what you were kind of sharing with us, I think like it's truly something important that we can't and shouldn't take for granted. Whenever we allow it, it can, who knows, most importantly, help us to like kind of like said, like overcome racism and all these negative things if we look towards the stars, to realize like the metaphors and the symbols and analogies that might help us to heal, really. Yeah.
I've been reading this book by Dr. Barbara Holmes. And so much here to consider, but she talks about how cosmological language may be the thing that can allow us to get past some of these things that have been difficult for us to, I mean, we thought how many years ago, decades ago, during the civil rights era, that maybe there were some things that would shift and change, that would lead us deeper into this beloved community. And yet when we take a look at where we're at right now and things that have happened with Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, it's so many innumerable others, it feels almost like there's been a doubling down. Not almost, I believe there has been a doubling down, that the actions against people in the AAPI community, the Asian American Pacific Islander community, and the things that they have experienced, the rhetoric we hear from people who are calling immigrants all kinds of names,
Right.
and which we can see right now in terms of people's reaction to the horrors of what is happening in Afghanistan, or the devastation in Haiti. And the language that we've been using, the language of liberation, Dr. Holmes is proposing that there are limitations to that language that have caused us potentially to be stuck, and that to get unstuck, that maybe by considering that we are part of a much bigger whole than we've ever thought about, that we can learn to embrace the diversity that is God-given. We can learn to see those places that maybe we have attached fear to as something that can be embraced. I mean, rather than looking towards the stars and taking a look at there and being fearful of what lies beyond our atmosphere, could we potentially learn to see that as something that is a beautiful whole that we just have not ever considered, and by stepping into that whole and that bigger web, if you will,
right,
of life, we don't even tend to talk about life as being something beyond our globe. We talk about how we're always looking for life elsewhere, but what if we just assume that's that whole cosmological experiment, I don't know what we want to call it, but that is life,
right,
there's more there. And then what does that mean for us?
Yeah.
I think it has implications for us in terms of how we take a look at things like what creation care, how we take care of this place, not just because this possibly has the only ability to sustain the life of the created, the creation that God has given here, but because it's an integral part of something even bigger. And maybe that integral part of what's here, rather than seeing what's beyond our atmosphere as not being part of our life, seeing it as it is a part of our life.
Right.
We just haven't been at a place of being able to even consider that yet, but here we are. And what does that mean? How do we allow that to expand our understanding of diversity, for one thing? How does that allow us to expand our understanding of God? How does that expand my understanding of who you are in terms of not just beloved community, but family?
Yeah.
Your family.
Yeah. Regardless. Well, I don't know how I should phrase this. Because sometimes I think when people use the phrase regardless of your race, it can be viewed as something that is like ignoring someone's difference. But that's not where I'm trying to reflect on. I guess when I'm using that phrase, I mean to say, like, your difference does matter, right? You are welcomed, so your Islamic tradition does matter. Your Africanness does matter. And whatever religious culture that is tied to your humanity does mean something to you. And I think, do you think that might be the reason why we have failed to perceive this beauty of the cosmos, because of the way in which we find ourselves to quickly like disregard our differences?
You know, I do wonder, Sam, if it could have something to do with for lack of a better phrase, brain development. That I wonder how much of it has to do with our self-perceived need for being able to create things to absorb that are in quote unquote bite-sized chunks,
right?
You know, because I think we've been taught to value order, and order in such a way that that order is confined, and sometimes in some spaces order to the extent that it leaves no room for mystery. So if I'm operating out of a part of my brain that says, I need to know exactly these things about you in order for me to put you in a certain category so I know how to operate, rather than categorizing every person, can I just take them who they are on their own and listen to them as they define themselves to me? For me, that's a radical shift in thinking. Sometimes it takes real concentration so that I don't go back to the old tropes of, this is what I know about this person because they check these particular boxes. But if I just take you as Sam and don't define you, allow the chaos of who you are to just unfold. I'm not saying that you're chaotic, but
yeah, I understand.
in terms of, you know, maybe I don't have to have that kind of order to experience the fullness of who you are.
Yeah. There has to be some sort of, I think that you are reminding me of the phrase that even Tommy Gibbons, for those who don't know what Tommy Gibbons says, he's a New Testament professor at Fuller Seminary, Theological Seminary, and me and Allisson, like I said, we both took a class together with him. And I'm in the class, there was one phrase that he would always express, which is, we as Christians haven't done our best to be open enough to allow our messiness to take place, even during the midst of the communion. That's a paraphrase there, but, and it sounds like that's what I'm hearing, that like,
Yeah, there is an element of that, because it's,
yeah,
because
if that ties to this discussion somehow.
we call it messy because we can't categorize people in neat boxes all the time.
Yeah.
Because in reality, nobody is exactly like another person. We are all unique.
Unique, yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think we can learn to embrace that so that we no longer have to, it may not be in my lifetime, but I think we can do it. I do think we can do it. I don't have to categorize you by your gender, by where you grew up, by the color of your hair, your eyes, your skin, where you spend your time, what part of town you live in, or any of those things. I hope and pray we will eventually just, when you and I interact with each other, you will just be the wonderful, unique Samuel Ansong. And that's all I need to know about you, other than what you decide to tell me, what you reveal to me, whether it's through your words or your actions.
Yeah, that's very powerful. As you're talking to me, I'm trying to see, how can I wrestle with this dynamic of the cosmos and what is visible, what is invisible, and what is visible, right? And what you just said is so powerful, because it's just now helping me to really realize, if I'm going to be honest, that like a lot of time we really want to force our way to unlock what we cannot fathom, what we can understand, rather than being patient with what can be brought to us, the gifts that can be brought to us. We want to try and unlock it. And I mean, sometimes I can understand why some people want to unlock the mystery, because who knows, like they have found themselves in such a depressive journey. Maybe a woman have formed some community, have failed to understand a man's journey in some shape or form. And so when they find themselves in this loneliness, maybe they'll find themselves trying to forcefully unlock the mystery or something like that. And even like, and the way that I relate to us is like, the same thing can even happen. And it sounds like what you're saying is, it's not every time that we have to try and force an information to come to us. And I think that's really powerful, whether if it's like information from God, or information from those who are near to us. Am I on the right track?
Well, here's the thing, Sam. I don't think I know what the right track is, but I think the fact that you and I are having this kind of dialogue, that's holy.
Yeah.
That there is holy ground between me and thee, and that you, as someone who is a question asker, which I think is healthy for all of us to do. That is a beautiful thing. That is one of your beautiful qualities. And what I'm hearing you say is that I'm hearing you say is that there is something helpful in asking those questions, but also taking the time to allow revelation to unfold.
Right. Very much so. And that actually brings me to my next question, which is it possible for us who are listening to have you reflect to us, or for us, some of the tradition that has shaped and have influenced you in terms of like the ways in which you have felt yourself being benefited from community that
well, certainly I can say that I think there has probably been far more patience than I will ever know on the part of many teachers along the way, who have allowed me the gift of unfolding revelation, for which I'm very, very grateful. So my undergraduate experience, well, actually even before then, I think I've had both teachers, formal and informal, who have presented me with fairly expansive things to consider, ways to consider. I think in the family that I grew up in, there was room for that in many ways. So those formative experiences, I was introduced to someone like Dietrich Bonhoeffer when as an undergraduate, and I can remember wrestling with some of his concepts, not in the classroom, but with friends, and what it would look like to really live in a community that he describes in his book Life Together. And I've had the opportunity to be part of faith communities where people gave each other the room to ask hard questions, and be okay if we didn't come to the same conclusion completely, that we're willing and able to give each other space to have different ideas. And I'm really grateful for that. And I also had the opportunity at various times along the way. Well, let me start back with when I was in grade school. We had some neighbors who had 2 kids who had very, very severe cerebral palsy, and they might have had other things that they were dealing with, but I know that there was not an ability to communicate with them in the way that I was used to communicating with friends, and by being able to have contact with them, to be taught by their mom how to interact with them. Their names were Doug and Patty. that was pretty formative for me, to have that privilege of being able to go over and talk to them, sometimes feed them, but try to interact with them in some way. And like I said, they were completely nonverbal. So that probably had a deeper impact than maybe I've really even unpacked in my life, for being able to be okay with difference and being around people that were different. And then having the incredible opportunity to be around people who were from different parts of the world at different points along the way, whether it was through exchange students who lived in our home, or international students I interacted with at universities, or just people I met along the way. That has been really important for understanding a little bit more how big the world is. And so again, back to the whole thing of language. So when I hear us talking about God being the God of the world and the universe, I don't have just my family and my immediate community in my head when I'm hearing that language. I have more people in my head when we're talking about that. People I really care about, people that are in parts of the world that I haven't seen for decades. But I know they exist, and I know that they're important, and they're important to me, but they're even more important to God. And all of that comes to bear when I'm engaging with liturgy, in a church service, or through prayer, or watching the news, or reading scripture. I'm not even sure I answered your question.
No, I think
off on a tangent.
Oh no, you're good. I was actually enjoying it. I think we have enough time for us to be reflecting on this. It makes sense, because like those are some pretty good traditions that we need for sure. Because to move on to the future, we need a sense of rituals, right? And it almost sounds like the rituals that you have experienced is to be able to be around people who are different from you, and to engage in conversations that will and can make us uncomfortable. And that's okay, because in the midst of that darkness is where we can find ourselves becoming more connected to each other. And even if we walk away or move on with our own individual life, we will not forget about each other, it seems like.
I love how you say that, Sam, because that's part of the beauty of the darkness, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, I just extracted that from whenever you were sharing about the traditions that you have experienced and how it shaped you, because like even whenever I think about the mysteries of darkness or death, love, suffering, and fear, and even hope, it's not always that I can fully comprehend these mysteries of the terms I've just listed. But the fact that we're sitting here just trying to grapple with how to interpret these terms and make sense of them, or how to interpret or share the insights that we have experienced throughout our generations is very powerful. Because for myself, I'm going to be honest, I'm living in a generation where there is Instagram or there is Facebook or there's Snapchat, and a lot of time when we go on these social media sites, we have friends that we are comfortable with easily, right? And for you, it seems to me that if there can be any kind of powerful transformation in us, we have to be able to include or become part of those who are different from us. And I think that's also pretty powerful too, that we need to really create space for differences, so we're not just stuck in what we perceive to be the status quo for us. So thanks for sharing that. Do you want to add something else to that, or?
Well, thank you for stating that so much more eloquently, I think, than I did. I appreciated it. You made that sound so much better. But yes, I do think that is one of the probably the deepest struggles, at least for me personally, is how to make the space for people who for sure think very differently about some things than I do, and yet at the same time, and this is where I'm so grateful for the scriptural tradition, because that gives me something that I can go back to, that when where I can say, well, is what's being carried out here really loving our neighbor? And I know that there are many complex situations that we can be faced with that it might be hard to figure out what the most loving thing is. But I do think that when we are attempting to turn away from the individualism and look at community and what it means to be a part of not just a community, because sometimes the way we use that word community means it's a collection of individuals.
Right.
And I'm using or trying to learn to use the word community in a sense where I'm talking about things that are interconnected. And such that what I do, what I say, has impact on others. And so if the people that I don't necessarily think exactly like, or who expressing an opinion or whatever that's different than mine, figuring out something that helps me see where the loving thing to do is. And that helps, I think, in holding some things such that I can say, there may be some things that I think are the loving and constructive thing to be doing now, that 50 years from now, my children, great-grandchildren, grandchildren may take a look at, and because of what they know, they may go, what were you thinking? Why would you have held that particular thought or understanding or whatever? I need to be able to somehow hold the tension of, I very well may be wrong. And at the same time, try to figure out how to do the best I can with what I know right now, and use love and what is the most loving thing to do. And realize that if I'm doing that most loving thing, that means letting go of some things that I might think are really important to me. Whether those are possessions or whatever, they could be thoughts, they could be things that are material and things are not material. That I need to hold loosely and maybe be willing to let go of, because there are things like reparations that if I'm going to step into what I say I believe about reparations, then I need to be willing to let go of some stuff. If I'm really going to step into seeing everyone, no matter what their differences are, as being an image bearer of God, then there are some things I have to let go of and figure out how to let go of, while still maintaining what God has made in me that's unique, but seeing that not as something that's so individualistic that I break away from that interwoven community.
Wow.
And honestly, Sam, I find that my language often fails me right now as I'm trying to figure out how to communicate this, because I think it's it's similar, but not exactly the same as some things we've heard before. And I'm still working towards trying to find ways to put words together so that it's a little different than before. And I'm struggling. Honestly, yeah. I'm struggling with it.
I think you're not alone in this. In this at all. For instance, like I come from a Ghanaian African family, and a lot of times, like whenever we hold the conversations of nationalism or sexism or racism, the discourse that we have tend to be very difficult. And there have been times when it has almost led me to say, you know what, I give up. There's this Donald Trump wall that I want to create. Just like Donald Trump can create walls, I think I can too. And we all can find ourselves creating walls or try to create walls.
For sure.
And I've been pushed to that position many times. And even in the midst of those conversations where I feel or might sense that like, why is it that some people have experienced these issues of racism, issues of sexism, they still brush it off? Because that's the world that I come from, in terms of my parents, or my sister who was like in her mid-30s. Like that, we struggle with that, right? Like, and just hearing from you, it's almost like these conversations have to be part of life just as much as we want guns to be part of life, or just as much as we want one country to be put on a pedestal and other countries to be seen as if they're nothing. that's really what you're helping me with, is so the question has to be for me that I want to like ask you now is, for someone who comes from an African family, is there like some encouragement or some advice that you might be able to share with anyone that's listening that can find himself in tensions with the parents or the brothers, and still not create this wall of division?
Yeah, I think, Sam, I think you have articulated probably one of the biggest difficulties as we learn to live with each other, live in a relationship where what I'm hearing you say is we honor, the people I've heard you name, I know are people who you want to honor in your lives and their role in your life. And at the same time, if you have differences on how you see a particular issue, how do you give yourself the freedom to hold what you hold, give them the freedom to hold that they hold? And where is that tension that we're talking about, something that becomes so taut that especially if you're disagreeing about something that you think has implications for someone else being able to flourish, or someone else being able to live, and that is where it becomes, I think, really, really difficult. All I can say at this point, I think, is to say to the people that you disagree with, my disagreement with you does not mean I don't love you. I could be wrong. But this is what I understand at this moment right now. This is where and how I understand this to be. And at this point, I don't see a way to completely embrace what you're saying. It doesn't mean I don't care about you. It just means I don't embrace what you're holding to or what you're saying right now. So, I think the place where many of us go in our heads then is, okay, so what would you have said to Nazis if they show up at the door? Or what did the student who stood in front of the tanks in Tiananmen Square say, have to say to the tank driver? What do the people in Afghanistan then say to the people in the Taliban who may be knocking on their door? And I guess for me, it is an understanding that what I see as life right now is not the whole thing, and that ethic of love is more important than anything else. And to be able to say to that person, I don't think you're right. I think what you're doing isn't right. Or even saying, like, you're so good at maybe asking the questions, Why are you doing this?
Hmm.
What is it that is compelling you to be doing what you're doing right now?
Hmm.
That could lead to somebody pulling out a gun and shooting you.
Hmm.
And we can then say, okay, and so if that were to happen, what about the impact on all the people in, if you were to take a stand for something like that, Sam, what would happen to all the people who are relying on you? Or there just are not easy answers in these particular situations. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I think what I have to do is trust you enough to say that I think you will do the very best you can in whatever situation you are presented with, to be Christ in that moment, and to trust you with that. And as you live your life and follow, if we're going to put this back into the realm of what I understand to be the force that I want to be speaking into my life, that if I can say to you, I trust you to make the decision that is going to be, to the best of your ability, the most Christ-like in the moment, then that's what I do. And if I get to be a part of your journey so that we discover together a little bit more of what that means, hallelujah.
Yeah.
There are some people that I've encountered that I think struggle mightily. They might, some who follow that Christ-like example, and they don't know the name of the person they're following, but they're doing it anyway. And then there's other people that I think, wow, I'm struggling to find Jesus here anywhere. This isn't, and so then do I engage with them? I think I do if I have them in front of me, and at the same time do the best I can when it comes to impacting the world for good as best I can understand it. But it's hard. I don't think you can do it without the support of people.
I agree.
I just don't, because it's hard. It's really hard.
I agree. And that's really why I asked you this, because I tend to believe that, because before I share this part, like in the past, a lot of my experience came from myself. It was almost as if like I have to go and search for whatever facts I can find so I can prove to people that what I'm expressing to them comes from sources that might be beneficial for them. But then now, like, things have changed. I asked that question because now, like, for me, like, kind of like what you're saying, like, if there's any kind of information or views that you have that you hope people to accept or think about or reflect on, it cannot be done without a support system, because the conversations that we have are very diverse, complex, and it definitely requires like a community to help us to act on these beliefs, so we might be able to share with a sense of humility. It can be very difficult, really, and I most importantly also like truly embrace one phrase that you shared previously, which was, we have to be willing to let go. And when you said that, I automatically thought about Moses. I don't know if he took off his sandals whenever he approached Yahweh at the burning bush. But it's just, that's one of the things that I'm willing to embody as I have these tough conversations. In American system, it almost sounds like even whenever we have our own political worldviews, if I'm going to assume that Moses took off his sandals, we don't really do that much. When we have a lot of these, like, it's like we want to experience the cosmic mysteries of God's blessings in this life, heaven, not just for America, but for all other countries, and especially the oppressed. We fail to take off our pride that is attached to our sandals, so to speak. I don't know.
I think that's a really powerful image, Sam.
And you make me to realize that, to be honest. That's one thing that you make me, like, you are leading me to just reflect on just now.
Well, I think that's the spirit at work between us, actually.
It's like, what is the golden rule? Sounds like.
So true. So true.
It also helps me to become mindful in how I de-associate myself from any kind of empire that I am tied to. Technology can be its own form of empire. The food that I consume can be its own form of empire. And at times, even clothes can be its own form of empire. And I think for our young generation, we have the potential to be making a difference, but we can also find ourselves in some struggling moments. And my mom, if I hear her story, for instance, like, for her to be carrying water in middle school, buckets of water to be selling in Ghana, and coming here, also working in a factory almost for her own entire life, so I can be blessed to be having these kind of conversations with you. It's something that I should not take for granted. For sure, I should always remember that even whenever we have our disagreements, young generation who find themselves having disagreements of their the generation of those who came before us, there still has to be a sense of respect and hope and gratitude, due to the fact that, like, the world that we live in is not just based on topics of racism. Racism is part of it, but it's when the cosmos become part of our topics, it broadens the complications of life. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that, and in ways that probably we can't even perceive right now, because that there's so much we don't know.
Yeah. Well, the last question that I want to ask here is that I've also been navigating through like human life and nature, and how this kind of journey of wilderness might help us to liberate. Yeah, I've been reflecting on that really, and it really just leads me to the question of what exactly is the meaning of life for you, and how do you think?
Well, you're going for the light questions, right?
Yeah, I am, for sure, because that's what we need right now, I think. Yeah, like and
But what is the meaning of life?
yeah, right. Because I think that we're definitely searching for that, because there's definitely too much plagues right now, and like we've grappled with like uncertainties, confusion. This new COVID variant, is going to create its own. So like for, now that we're like getting ready to depart, like that's the kind of question, like how can we walk away? Where do we go from here? Something like MLK would say, in terms of discovering a sense of meaning that might be valuable for us.
Well, I think one of the things is maybe part of what you're highlighting is that as we're dealing with the surge in the Delta variant, and we could be looking at, we don't know how that's going to impact our ability to be together again. Here's how do you maybe create that community when it feels like you're being pulled back and away from community, or back into a community that maybe honestly you need a break from. I don't know. But how do you find those places where you're going to be with people who are helping you ask these kinds of questions, wrestle with some of this stuff, and take a look at what it means to move into the cosmos, beyond just the natural world, or just the world of our particular globe. I do think that I strongly believe in the power of the Holy Spirit. That when we have experienced breath over the last year and a half or more as something that is, we don't take it for granted quite as much as we used to. We're aware a little more of how our lungs are really important in being able to breathe and breathe deeply, and how that feels in our bodies is so important. And we're used to hearing the Holy Spirit talked about as the breath of God. And that it seems to me like I hear from different sectors over and over again that people, the presence of God, the breath of God, the Ruach, has been with people in places that they didn't expect it. And so I think some of what I heard you say in terms of just the unknown that's before us carries with us that sense of there's also the unexpected, and maybe we can try to learn to embrace the unexpected and see what it holds for us, and find ways to engage with people that we wouldn't necessarily have thought we would do. And I don't know what that's going to look like for people exactly. You reaching out to me to have this conversation not that long ago, really, even the last time you and I were physically in the same space, which was, almost 4 years ago at this point, or more than 4 years ago now. I would have never predicted then that you and I would have the opportunity to have this kind of a conversation together. And I do find, despite that I do think there's hope. I do really find that there is hope that maybe on the 5 or 6 o'clock news, it doesn't sound very hopeful. But when I have the opportunity to interact with you, when I have the opportunity to interact with a variety of other people, some of them inside of the church and some of them outside of the church, I find there to be hope that people are earnestly seeking. How can we build something that is more loving, something that is more equitable, something that addresses the wrongs of the past and helps people move into a future with parity? And that provides me a great deal of hope. That doesn't mean I don't have my days where I'm like, but I do have hope, because I do think that God has not abandoned us. I do think God is at work, and not only at work here in my community, in my country, in the globe, but at work in the universe. That there is something of God happening out there in the universe that is way beyond anything I think we even started talking about in seminary. Not that seminary didn't help us with some of that, but I don't think we even, I don't recall ever scratching the surface of really talking about a God of a cosmos. And for me, being able to step outside my door and see the amazing life of a dandelion that shows up in places that I would never expect a dandelion to show up, and the persistence and the tenacity of that little plant, I think has so, therein lies the kingdom of God. It's like a dandelion. It shows up in places I wouldn't expect it. Peeking through, rock hard dirt, up between cracks in cement, and showing their fluffy little yellow heads in places I would never expect. And then I find out that there's even medicinal qualities about this thing that we've called a weed. Dandelion tea is supposed to be pretty good for you. That being able to just even the lowly dandelion somehow is reflective of God.
Yeah.
And then to go from there to looking at the stars is amazing.
Yeah. Like, wow, that's amazing. That's truly amazing. Like I just sitting here just reflecting on the tree of the cross,
Hmm.
because that's its own nature.
Mm-hmm.
The thorns, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
dandelions has like some thorn. It looks like some thorns on the sides of it. But even like think about that. But then there's some sort of healing, concrete healing that can be formed out of this dandelion that we have portrayed as some sort of weed.
Mm-hmm.
And not only just that, another thing too that I am reflecting on is um, the fact that um, we have missed or taken for granted the conversations that me and you are having now can and should be beneficial for sure when we move on, because I think that is truly the heavenly experience that we are all seeking for. The conversations that can be had like in this behind media, that even you're not even going to see it being commented on social media for everyone to see. That truly is heaven for sure, and I think definitely opened my eyes to that reality. And then also another thing too that I'm reflecting on is that the navigations of human life truly depends on the answers to these questions, the response of authorities, maybe a kind of authority that has been formed out of a collective, right? Not just an authority that might be tied to the symbolism of Pharaoh, for instance.
Oh, mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a new authority that needs to be valued is those who don't think like us. Maybe a pastor who has been so judgmental towards someone who's homeless, someone who is has been seen as a prostitute or something like that. What would it mean for an authority, a new sense of authority, to be formed out of the dark and light?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or, I
To
don't know.
to embrace the dark in a new way and see that there's something there to learn from. That's one of the things about this book that Dr. Holmes wrote, Race in the Cosmos, is the way that quantum physics, which I don't want to pretend that I have more than just the tiniest grasp of what quantum physics is about, but that there is something there again, with the concept of energy and what dark matter and black holes represent. That we've talked about them in the past as if they were, or at least in my past, as if they were nothingness, and yet we're discovering that that's not at all what they are. They're not nothingness. They're just something different than what we've understood before, and that there's a certain kind of messiness, I think, that we might do well to figure out how to embrace. I remember a few decades ago learning a little bit, very, very little bit, again, about chaos theory, and that it was the advent of the computer that allowed chaos to be shown what it looks like over time. And that's what fractals are, those lines that kind of, I can't remember which computer program it, and I don't even know if it exists anymore, but there used to be some kind of operating system that had these lines that would change colors and do all kinds of things, and that was kind of like a fractal. And that these things called fractals, which are really beautiful, are the result of computers being able to take chaos and extend it out over time, and that it ends up being this really beautiful image of what chaos looks like. And I think we're learning, back to the whole idea of language changing, I think we're learning that chaos isn't a negative, that there's something to it to be embraced, and that may be part of what we are in the process of learning how to do now, is step into that chaos and say, part of that chaos means that maybe there's some things that are predictable, maybe there's some things that aren't predictable, and the things that aren't predictable are no less important or valuable than the things that are predictable. And trying to figure out how in my own life to embrace those things that don't fit within what I would like to construct, what I want to see as predictability and manageability in my own life. When these other things happen, to see the gift in it.
Yeah. I think about wildlife. And in the wildlife, there is wildfires.
Oh, there sure is.
Right. And then like even that, those who don't really understand the mosaic structure of the forest might quickly judge it as if, oh, there's pollution that is going to harm the forest. But then the more we think about it, we can also discover that even in the midst of this chaos or this wildfire that just erupted in the forest, life can be birthed. I was watching a YouTube documentary where it showed, like, I think it was squirrels or ants or birds that they have these long beaks, right? And they were poking holes in these burnt trees that is like super long. And they created house in that burnt tree, because it regrew again, something like that. But it was like all burnt, right? And then they created holes and the whole tree was dark. There was no leaves on it. And even now,
but it's still beautiful, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, it's still beautiful due to the fact that even nature can still do the very best to create some sort of home in the midst of chaoses. Was very interested to see, for sure.
Yeah, there's still life there.
Look at this tree. This is called a snag. This is a tree that was completely burned down. The first thing that happens is that around the base of this tree, you're gonna have a bunch of new wildflowers and fungi and plants that couldn't grow there before because there wasn't sunlight, because it was in shadow. Now they can grow. In the tree itself, you're going to have a lot of insects and bugs that now can live inside of the cavity of this tree because it's dead. It's now becoming more hollow. Then let's say a woodpecker swoops in and starts to eat those bugs. And in the process of pecking on this dead tree, this snag, they hollow out a big hole in this tree. Then a mammal maybe can come into this ecosystem and find the hollow in this tree made by the woodpecker a great habitat, a great home where they can live. Suddenly this snag, this totally burned down tree, is actually now an amazing neighborhood in the forest city. The neighborhood has affordable housing, it has amazing new restaurants, and it has a diversity of different inhabitants that all come together and share their different specializations and their benefits for the benefit of all. The reason why this is such a good thing is because the currency of a forest is diversity, biodiversity. An ecosystem that has lots of different plants and animals that all do different things is a more resilient, more thriving ecosystem. I mean, my intuition would have said that the healthiest forests in the world look like this. But it turns out the healthiest forests in the world look like this. Forest experts will call this kind of patchier look a mosaic.
It's thinned the forest out a little bit. It's created a mosaic.
There's still some sort of life there,
Mhm.
truly. And even when you talk about quantum physics, like I think about the way in which like we are all like made of some sort of particles. Like particles make up matter, that kind of thing, and the forces that we interact with. Even like theologically, I'm just thinking about me and you are particles, or we are here, and we're talking and we're communicating, and we are like discovering other new perspectives of life that can become like a magnet, really. And I think we definitely do need that. We need a new sense of like of different unique people just coming along to shape us, reshape us, lead us to deassociate away from the things that we hold on to that is so good for us. Who knows if they can be idolatry?
You know, it seems like Jesus modeled for us over and over and over again how it was to hear from, interact with, maybe even learn from the people that had been put in places or had been categorized as people who were not teachers. They were not the rabbis. They were not the ones who usually got to speak into other people's lives and share their wisdom and learning. I think of the woman who challenged Jesus and said, you know, even the dogs eat from the scraps, and how she stopped Jesus in his tracks. And you know, there's so many different ways to take a look at that particular scripture, so many ways to unpack it, but it seems like Jesus was consistently sharing with us examples of people and places that we didn't usually look to, we don't usually look to learn from. And that there is so much there to be able to learn from, if we open ourselves to the Holy Spirit's teaching and be willing to hear from places that maybe we have labeled and categorized as unworthy of learning from.
Amen. Amen. Allisson, thank you very much for creating the space, creating the time for you to join Mississippi in your neighborhood and to share with us the importance of what it means to talk about how light, the light of darkness, the light of chaos, and the light of light can inform how we think about unity, and especially those who have been oppressed, whether if they are in countries of the Middle East, places like Skid Row. And I'm sure like there are definitely places in my own country, people who are finding themselves in forms of oppression, just really all over the world, really. I'm sure this conversation that we are able to have in this communion can truly benefit many people if they have the ears to hear. So thank you very much, and I truly appreciate you for sure. God bless you.
God bless you, Sam. It's a mutual feeling, and this has been a blessing and really truly a privilege to get to have this time with you today.
Thank you.
I'm very grateful.
Thank you very much.
Being a soldier and seeing third world countries fall apart and come back together over nothing, man.
Did you say you're a soldier?
Yeah, U.S. Army. I served 2 tours in Afghanistan, man, and I joined basic training. I saw the towers fall from basic, man. I went into my enrolled date is September 1st, 2001, and I was in Fort Knox. That's where I was stationed, Kentucky, and I watched the gold that doesn't exist. But the tank division, and
Well, when you said you had PTSD, I kind of thought, but
it's I'm a peaceful man. I'm a hippie. I don't fight. I'm not violent. I'm a complete freaking buttercup. And I get a lot of shit for it out here. But I had to point a rifle at people I didn't know and use it. And it fucking fucks me up. Because it's not a pretty thing. It is a nasty, visceral event, and I see where psychopaths come from, man, because that's how they deal with it, is they embrace it and thirst for it. I could see it because it's so ugly you can't look at it for what it is as real. You have to fucking
war
hide.
sucks.
War is stupid. You know, we guarded a freaking lithium mine when we got there because cell phones were coming out with lithium ion batteries and drills. That was the other asset besides opium we are over there protecting once we seize control over the Taliban. I fought for nothing, just like my father in Vietnam. We fought for fucking, he fought for heroin and drug money, and I fought for lithium and freaking heroin too.